This is the show we are so unbelievably proud to bring you. Bret the Hitman Hart, for the first time since his stroke, a worldwide exclusive. Where was he immediately after the stroke? How about his recovery? And Vince McMahon, what does he think of him now? Bret Hart, one-on-one. Bring it on.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
I don't want to take too much time here. If you're watching, you know what we've got today. A great wrestler, a very good friend, and a really inspirational guy, Bret Hart. This interview is a worldwide exclusive. It's the first TV that you have done since you had the stroke, so thank you so very much for trusting us with us. Nice to see you. Nice to see you looking so good.
Glad to be here.
First off, we should start with your amazing recovery. You look great right now. Hair's a little bit short. On one hand, I know that you're here to talk to your fans, but also to test yourself. Everybody knows that you had a stroke. They may not realize that it was very serious, that you were actually paralyzed on the left side of your body and almost died. Sitting here today, I gotta ask you, how you feeling?
I feel really good. I am glad to be alive and glad to be where I am today. When I remember where I was before, when I had the stroke, kind of like if you were at the bottom of a barrel, I was at the bottom of a real deep hole, and I remember those moments when I first had the stroke in the first few weeks and maybe even the first couple of months. There's some pretty dark times for me.
I think we want to put it in perspective for people that they don't understand, because in the world of wrestling, it's all about a work, and it's all fake, right? But this is as real gets. You were riding your bike, you fell, you're in the hospital, the doctors tell you you have a stroke, you've had a stroke, that your life's in jeopardy. I want you to tell me physically what you were not able to do at that point.
When they took me into the hospital, all I had was a little bit of feeling in my toes and a little bit of feeling in the tips of my fingers. And I didn't get it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't find out till about 4 in the morning the night I had the stroke that I had one. And I didn't understand it, and I was actually thinking for the first 4 days, even though they told me what it was, I kept thinking, I'm just gonna get up and walk out of here in about a week or 2 weeks. 3 weeks from now, I'll be sitting in my house joking about this. And it took me about 4 days, and then I think it was even my doctor came in, and I asked him the question. I said, I guess I should get used to the fact that I'm not going to get up and walk out of here. And he said, you're looking at 6 months just to recover.
But there were no guarantees, right? I mean,
No.
You walked in today with hardly a limp. You and I talked before we went on camera for a half hour. You sat and you ate sandwiches, you had a cup of coffee, we laughed about all kinds of stuff. I mean, this is literally a staggering achievement, and there was no guarantee at that point that you would ever be able to walk unassisted, that you'd ever be able to lead a normal life.
No, they don't make any guarantees, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of stroke people don't recover, or they don't get a lot of it back, and so they don't want to make any big promises. And they were very vague, and I could see that they were being vague, and you sort of sink. Depression, and you're emotionally you're devastated. You know, if you go to a stroke ward, everybody on it's in tears, and everyone's crying, and it's a very, very depressing hallway to walk down. But there was I had some really good people that, especially the physio people in Calgary at the Foothills Hospital. They really worked well with me, and they pushed me, and I have met a lot. I have a newfound respect for hospitals and nurses and the people in that healthcare system, that not just with me, but all the people in the physio department.
So your life was cruising along pretty normally. You had been recovering from a post-concussion problem that had forced you to retire from wrestling. You were telling me that you had an invitation from Daniel Agali the night you had your stroke to have dinner with
Kofi Annan, the head of the United Nations. They had the summit. I was actually riding my bike to ride downtown to kind of just check it out, the summit. And yeah, I mean, 1 minute I was on top of the world, and the next minute I couldn't even turn my hand over or anything. It was.
So I want to ask you then, as you sit in this darkness that you talked about, you're depressed, you're wondering about the rest of your life. Where was the first ray of sunshine? At what point did you realize, you know what, I'm seeing some positive situations here that are developing?
I don't know. That's hard to answer. I think the first, I mean, I was able to stand on my leg, but when I was able to do that, that was a big thing, to stand and sort of be able to walk, but I couldn't really walk yet. I could use the wall or something, or lean on something. But I think one of the first things, I just remember I woke up in the morning in the hospital and I hadn't been able to move hardly anything, just a little bit of my fingers now. And I remember I just looked at the nurse came in and I went like this. And that was a big thing.
Now, you were a guy who had to put up with enormous amounts of pain in the ring, right? I mean, that's what it is. To wrestle for Vince McMahon, you got to be able to go out there when you're in pain. You got to go out there when your shoulder is killing you. Contrast the pain that you thought was so extreme from when you wrestled to what you felt, immediately after your stroke.
No comparison. I mean, the stroke, I wasn't really in a lot of pain, but I think, it was definitely my biggest battle. Like I couldn't get around being, like having I couldn't do anything.
Let me ask you this. Did the fact that you were a high-performance athlete, that you were used to training in the gym all the time, that it was all about staying in shape, and it was all about putting up with the pain of being in the gym, did that help you or did it hurt you?
In the beginning, because of my muscle mass, say, and my size and stuff, it's actually works against you because you have to carry around more weight than like if you're
the normal
if you're a
person would
smaller,
have. Yeah.
thinner guy, it's a lot easier to start recovering. But in saying that, once you get to say like where the halfway point of the 6 months that I started to recover, after about 3 months, all that muscle mass and your old strength and your old pistons everything starts to come back. Then I start to recuperate faster than someone that didn't work out, and it starts to benefit it. But it does not in the beginning because you're dragging around like a 50-pound leg and a 30-pound arm.
I got to ask you, and we'll take a break so we can reload. This is amazing. This is Bret Hart. It's the first time that he's talked, and we totally cherish the fact that you're doing it on this show. I want to ask you about Vince McMahon. I want to ask you about who responded to you and who didn't, and lots more. Bret Hart, one-on-one on Off the Record. The best thing about this is that you're alive and well and looking really good. Great to see you, man.
That's for sure.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
Bret Hart, one-on-one on Off the Record. You talked about your situation, how dark it was, how devastated you were by your stroke. But there was a point when you recovered and you understood that, you know what, I got a shot and I'm probably going to be able to go back to living a reasonable life. When you realized that, how much had your impressions, your values, what you thought about life, how much had they changed at that point?
I went through so many different phases. Like in the beginning, in the first few weeks that I had a stroke, I tried not to get bitter. I was really angry about it. I couldn't believe it. It's like, like I was really mad and I was really bitter and just really down. And once I started getting little things back, like I can tell you it was a huge thing for me. And I used to get in the car every day. They'd pick me up and put me in the car, take me home sometimes for a weekend pass. I'm living at the hospital. And I remember I would flip the visor down in the car and I would stare at it. And I can remember for weeks, maybe months, I couldn't wink. My eye was just like that. And I can remember flipping it down one day and going, and it was just such a huge thing.
Well, the ability to wink is of uppermost importance to most
men. Meant a lot to the
nurses, too. So how do you look at life differently now than you would have at the peak of when you wrestled? I mean, you were known for your focus to wrestling, but how does your impression change of the world around you and what you want?
Well, I think you get started looking at what's really important to you. And, like all the things that seemed important the day before, a lot of my hard feelings towards people didn't mean as much. And it's like, got to get on with the important things like your family and things like that in your life that are so much more worth putting your time into.
One of the things that you find out, besides how you find out how people feel about you, right?
Yeah.
So you have this, devastating situation, which I want to know, and it's obviously we're talking about people that the folks at home would know from the world of wrestling or whatever. Who was there for you? Who do you feel, really they were there?
Well,
when
I want
you
to say
needed them?
first and foremost, obviously my family was there for me. My wife Julie was tremendous. She was really, really good, and my kids were all great. But I have to say something about Walter Gretzky, who made contact with me in the first few days that I was in there, and was just a real support for me. And I don't even know if Walter Gretzky knows how much he did for me.
Well, I mean, he's a walking example, I guess, from your standpoint of where you could go, which is the greatest inspiration. But that's the kind of inspiration that you can now be for somebody else, right? Someone who's watching the show, who is a family member, who was in your position, can show this tape to them and say, see?
Roddy Piper was another one. Roddy Piper came up. I had a lot of the Canadian wrestlers called me. Benoit, Jericho, Edge, all these guys. A lot of the Canadian wrestlers called me. For some reason I didn't get a lot. Undertaker, we spoke, and I had a lot of old friends finally call me and that kind of thing. It's funny, after I left the WWF the way I did, and even the way I left the WCW, I think a lot of wrestlers were afraid or intimidated to call me, or maybe they didn't want to open up that can of worms, or maybe it would get them in trouble for talking to me or something like that. But I never heard from too many wrestlers, even after, especially after my brother Owen's passing. I kind of found myself isolated because people just didn't want to go there. They didn't want to talk about it, and with the lawsuit and all the stuff that was going on.
You and I have always spoken candidly. I mean, you've been open and honest, and I always say to you, is there anything you don't want to talk about? And you say, ask me anything. And after Owen's death, you spoke about Owen's death and the people that you felt had betrayed you and all of that. And I know that was so divisive for your family, but sitting here today after your stroke and your recovery, has that helped to bond your family once again? Because sometimes it does have that effect.
No, I can't say it did, because I think the divisiveness in my family was brought about over, for me anyway, was the loyalty to my brother Owen and the disloyalty to him by some members of my family. So I found actually when I had my stroke, I scratched several names off my guest, like my list, to come visit me. I didn't even want them to come in. But
Who was that?
my sister Diana, who was married to Davey Boy. I never really saw eye to eye with her, and I kind of closed the door on them, and they don't exist for me anymore. Ellie, my sister Ellie, was married to the Anvil. They were too hell-bent on getting jobs for their husbands rather than thinking of Owen and his family, and I never forgave him for that.
I want to hear what you have to say about Vince McMahon, but I want to say that your slogan was the best there is, the best there was, and we can still say the best there ever will be. He's Bret Hart. What's the situation with Vince McMahon? Hold on to that. We'll find out next. As Bret Hart told us every single time he's been on the show, go wherever you want. Probably the guy that you have had the most abrasive, the most on-again, the most off-again relationship with is Vince McMahon. You came on the show in 1997 and talked about Survivor Series, about how he had betrayed you, about how you smacked him and all of that. Sitting here today in 2003, do you still hate the guy?
No, I don't. Well, hate's a big word, but I don't know.
Just so you know, Bret, I'll bail you out of anything. I'm not bailing you out of this one. Do you still hate Vince McMahon?
No, I think I've moved on past that a little bit. I certainly don't forgive what he did. I don't care for how they justify. They try to minimize it all today, like it was nothing, and it was it was just doing business, and it was never about business. It was just about being dishonest and unfair, and I've never been too happy with what they did. But when I had my stroke, he called me in the hospital, and I was such a wreck at that time that he actually caught me completely off guard. It was just Vince McMahon on the phone, and I thought it was a nice gesture anyway, and I went back on his word there. But we talked that day, and he goes, just to have him call me anything you want. And I thought that was a good sign and a nice gesture. And I thought, you know, for me, I have to find a little closure too. You know, I don't want to keep dragging around all this bitterness and hard feelings towards Vince McMahon for forever. I don't know what happened I still don't know what happened with my brother Owen, because it never went to trial, and no one ever justified or explained to me what happened, including Martha or anybody else. It just, you know, someone paid for that to be put away, and that's sealed in a box somewhere. But I mean, once I kind of realized there's nothing I can do to get back to that, to carry it around and have, it's just a big weight on your back all the time. And I had enough weight on my back when I had the stroke, so I just thought, here's a chance to kind of, he's offering an olive branch, and I thought it would be in best interest for me and my family even. And I have nephews in my family that have aspirations to wrestle, and they want, you know, if you're going to get into wrestling, where are you going to go? You know, and I didn't want them to feel that they couldn't go work for Vince if they want to someday. I have a nephew, Ted, who's actually quite a good wrestler, and Davey Boy's son, Harry. They're both great little wrestlers, and I think they are a little hesitant to go work for Vince, and maybe Vince is hesitant to hire them.
I got to ask you this, though. Knowing what you know now, the way your life has evolved, the way wrestling has been, I'm sure the best thing that ever happened to you and the worst thing. If they were your kids, would you try to keep them away from wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, I do steer my kids away from it. But if they really wanted to do it, I mean, wrestling, I mean, I'd rather my kids got into wrestling than, you know, if he was doing drywall or something. You know, not that there's anything wrong with doing drywall, but it just, wrestling was exciting and a lot of fun, and, you know, I saw the world. And there's a lot of good things that can come out of wrestling. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad things that happen in it too. It's not a business that takes care of its own, that's for sure.
There's not a man on the planet, there's not a family in the world that could talk about the good and the bad of wrestling like you guys. I want to find out, though, you sat face to face with Vince McMahon, right? We'll talk about that when OTR returns. Just a short amount of time left in this. I have to say this has been one of the truly remarkable experiences that I've had on the show. As you know, and I've told you many times, that Off the Record owes Bret Hart a lot. You came on our show when we first started. You put trust in us right away. You drew us an audience, and for that, we're totally thankful. And for the fact that you're sitting here in this worldwide exclusive, you know, it's pretty wonderful. Thanks,
No
Bret.
one's happier to be here than me.
Well, I have to say that you have educated people on bravery and coming back, and you've shown us where you are. You had a meeting with Vince McMahon, which I'm intrigued with, just a couple of weeks ago, right? You guys sat face to face. Tell me what you were thinking in Florida at his place and what came from that meeting.
Well, I just want him to kind of know that I think a lot of people, and a couple of my sisters again, kind of painted this picture of me being this, I was so out to get him, and I was driving the lawsuit, which I never had anything to do with Martha's lawsuit. I certainly stood beside her on it and tried to be as much help as I could, but I was not driving it. And I think he thought that I was really the driving force in the family that was trying to sort of get back. There's a lot of people that really, which I think is just stupid, that think that I had hard feelings for Vince, what happened in Montreal, in comparison to anything else. You know, it's like, you know, I think what happened with Owen.
What did you feel when you saw him? And I'm interested because this is the meeting of two guys that had fought it out publicly, including on this show. You talked about how much you hated each other. He ridiculed you on this show. When you saw him face to face, what was your feeling? And did he shake your hand? Did he hug you?
Yeah, he gave me a big hug. And I think it was, people have to understand, Vince, in a lot of ways, was like a father to me. We were really close. We were so close prior to that last week that I worked, and it was such a shame. I think it was some really bad judgment on his part, what happened. And I thought it was time to kind of heal the wound a little bit and let him know that I didn't wander around my house with my fist clenched, cursing his name everywhere. And
not anymore, at least.
Not anymore.
You clearly used to do that.
And I think I thought, you know, he made a gesture, and I'm going to make a gesture back and let him know that I want peace. I don't want to keep carrying around the hard feelings. And he was nice, and we actually talked about maybe doing a DVD on my greatest matches, and we're kind of getting around some of the sore spots that we had, and I certainly don't want to say anything that
I got to ask you,
upsets all that.
Would you come back? Not as a wrestler, of course. I'll ask you that question.
Not a chance.
Not even appearance.
I don't think so. It's highly unlikely.
What about if he came to you with a thank you tour, saying, you know what, we didn't say goodbye correctly, which is obviously the case back then?
I have thought about maybe if the audience was there, because I have to look at it from his side. What is he going to benefit? But if there was an opportunity to go back and that's one of the things I said to him. I said, I just want to be remembered for my contribution. That's what's bothered me is you erased everything I did, or you didn't erase it, but you've sealed it so no one really sees it, and I'm not remembered for what I did.
What do you remember of Curt Hennig? Obviously, he's passed away. That news just came to us, passed away yesterday. What are your thoughts?
That was really upsetting for me, because I would say Curt was in one of the top, like my 5 best friends in the wrestling business, and we had such a great chemistry together, and I can't believe that it happened. But someone asked me a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, said, who is your favorite wrestler? And if you could have one guy in the ring and you could be wrestling him, who would it be? And I feel good now saying that I said it was Curt Hennig. And we had such great matches. And when you look at your career, my career, and you look how you sort of climbed up, I really climbed up wrestling against Curt. And that was, I won the Intercontinental belt against Curt. And if anyone knows the true story about what happened in the SummerSlam that year, is that Curt hurt his back pretty bad. And a lot of wrestlers wouldn't have showed up that day, but Curt showed up in the SummerSlam to
like
put
you're saying,
me over.
He's amazing. I'm going to do something I didn't think I'd have to do, which is cut you up, because I couldn't shut you up. And that's the best way it could be. We'll see you next time. Bret Hart 2, 1 week from today.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight. Michael Landsberg's wardrobe supplied by Grafton & Company. Get it at Grafton.
You know what? Look at that.
I can smile. I can give a real smile if it's